Do you like wrestling trivia? Then check out the 5-Star Match Game, the Pro Wrestling Quiz Show. I'm Joe Gagney, and every episode, I grill 3 contestants with 5 rounds of power-packed wrestling trivia. We have over 30 evergreen episodes in the archives covering WWE, AEW, Japan, Mexico, and much, 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 much more. Play along at home and check it out today.
Hey everybody, my name is Jesse Collins, and I am the host of the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, a show right here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. On the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, we take a deep look at individual issues and stories that are going on in the wrestling world. Each episode is about a different topic, and we take a thorough and educated look at things ranging from current booking trends to breakdowns on individual performers and angles to investigations into different fan cultures across the industry. In addition, we keep a close eye on the wrestling media, and as a professional journalist, I bring a unique perspective to how current issues in wrestling are being covered and discussed through the wrestling media. We have a revolving series of guests from across wrestling punditry joining us on each episode, and we hope that you make the choice to give us a listen on wherever you get your podcast from. Welcome back, everyone, to the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, as always, Jesse Collins, and joining me, he is a returning guest to the show. You're most likely familiar with his work, but if you are not, he is the co-host of the Between the Sheets podcast, which you can check out on the Between the Sheets Patreon page. He is also our New York City correspondent. It's David Bixenspan. David, how are you?
I'm doing okay.
How's New York City doing? How are things going on in New York City?
As we're recording this, seems like hopefully getting better because based on the election and everything, and the fact that it was so overwhelming too, the results.
So, you're talking, of course, about the recent mayor Zoran Mamdani. Mamdani. I read in the New York Post that 1 million New Yorkers were pondering leaving New York.
Yeah,
if he
not
got
sure how that
elected.
works.
Have you seen that? Have you seen like an exodus of people going over the George Washington Bridge with their,
No.
like in Grapes of Wrath, the people leaving Oklahoma with all the stuff tied to their car?
No.
You haven't seen that yet. Oh, well, I was hoping that would maybe bring housing prices down if that was in fact an accurate assessment by the New York Post, but perhaps not. Anyway, the reason we're recording today is I just had this general idea that's been floating around my head for a while. And I've kind of lamented this before, talking about like I just think like wrestling discourse has really gone downhill, and it's a lot of that is focused on like I just think we talk about wrestling too much and the focus is on weird stuff, and um but I do feel like loosely this year in particular we've reached like a new nadir in what it feels like most of the discussion is about in terms of what seems to drive a lot of the discussion, what we tend to focus on, and are we getting dumber just in general? And is this something unique to wrestling, or is this something happening just through modern conversation across the board? Um, and I guess like to give an example, uh, Bix, you and I have both worked for many different wrestling news sites for what would be considered a considerably long period of time. Um, and there's always been the staple of the news site has been, oh, like here's what an old wrestler said about blank, right? That's like drives the SEO gambit wild, which is we can put Bret Hart says this, whether or not there's a really enormous amount of news relevancy to it is non-existent. But
Especially since the podcast boom, so the last
right.
decade has really seen a ramp up in
And it
that.
does seem like we are like now that is almost like the dominant form of like aggregated content now. I don't know if that's because scoops have changed, the scoop game has changed, um, or social media has impacted, but now it just seems like all we do is if you follow any news aggregating site on social media, which I'm assuming most of my listeners do, like pretty much like I don't know, like it seems like 50% of the posts now are just um oh, ex wrestler, former wrestler says this, and it's just all crap for the most part. It's very, very little does it have relevancy. And I like I said, this has always been a staple, but do you feel like it's gone like even more extreme like in the past year or so?
I can see the argument. Like, numerically, would it be true? I don't know. But I, I wouldn't be shocked if that was the case for sure. It it just feels like it's just, if you look at the front page of a wrestling site, if you look at Reddit and what's the most, upvoted posts or top ranked, I guess, because it's not already always the votes that they're going by. But any of that stuff,
Hmm.
it seems like it's much heavier on here is this wrestler's take than it used to be. Um, I think part of that is also just that the wrestlers themselves, including the older ones, maybe especially the older ones, know more now about how there is potentially money in that. And I guess we might as well just say it right off the bat that, I mean, you and I have both know for a fact, between things we've witnessed personally and what, friends and colleagues have said, that negative AEW stuff, headline wise, does much better than, neutral or positive AEW stuff, or even a lot of WWE stuff. So it drives the algorithm in such a specific way, and that's continued to be the case for years, that it makes sense that it would just keep compounding and compounding.
Yeah, I've really always just kind of like philosophically questioned that in the sense of like right, I've heard the same thing told to me basically, which is like all WWE news generally does well, uh, and negative AEW news does well. Like neutral or positive AEW news, depending on the subject, of course, doesn't really move the needle all that much. And that's just like, is it just so that there's like that many haters out there to drive that? Is it like AEW fans like kind of craving that kind of like negative news about the company for whatever reason? We all know people like to doom post and doom scroll and things like that. I find it kind of hard to believe that that's actually true, but when we talk about especially like what the aggregators are doing, we're also talking about they're trying to gain SEO, they are trying to attract clicks kind of no matter what. Um, I think a lot of it has to do with the expansion of like social media to developing countries and kind of what that traffic might be looking for as opposed to fans in the United States or the UK. Um, but it is interesting that it ends up that's been consistently the case, and it's clearly reflected in the kind of information that we see.
That's not something I would have thought of, but like, and I'm trying to figure out the way to say this that kind of sounds the most right. I mean, there has been a pretty big ramp up in the last couple of years of the bigger wrestling sites bringing on writers from India as like the night shift. Like, that is a big change that has happened. Does that necessarily have anything to do with what we're seeing? I don't know about that,
I don't think
but
about the writers as much as I think about just the traffic.
mm,
Like, I remember looking at the Wrestling Inc. numbers, and I think India was the second biggest country for like readership and where our
this is
clicks were
using
coming from.
what you call it, the third party tool that everyone uses that I'm forgetting the name of.
Yeah, it's what Amazon used to. I think Amazon used to run it, right?
But
Was it
it's
called
not what is the one everyone uses? It's not compete.com, it's something else.
was it called Alexa back then? It was a long
Amazon,
time ago.
no, Alexa, that was called Alexa, but it was a different Alexa.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? Though, like this is a long time ago. So
That was a long time
yeah,
ago, but that was based only on people who had their like weird toolbar installed.
yeah. But anyway, the and I think that's true. Like if you talk about like where a lot of like YouTube viewership comes from and things like that. India has a massive market. I mean, it's got a huge amount of people, And one of the reasons that wrestling companies, especially WWE, have been so keen on it is that they are often looking to monetize. Like, how can there's clearly like a huge appetite for wrestling fandom through these like free to engage um, metrics, like following on social media, watching YouTube videos, that kind of thing. How can we monetize that? Um, but so I don't think it's as much as like, oh, that we're like hiring writers who have a certain perspective. I just do think that if such a large amount of volume is coming from people that we don't really like I don't really understand their wrestling fandom, I guess. Like I don't really know what it's like to be a wrestling fan in India or to be like an 18-year-old Indian wrestling fan. So I'm just kind of, it's almost like that's like a black box that can be used to explain some certain phenomenon. Like, why doesn't a positive AEW traffic do as well as negative AEW traffic?
I don't know. And I was thinking of what you call it, SimilarWeb is the current like third party site
Hmm.
that people can use. So I'm signing in there now to see if there's anything we can glean. But I don't know. I mean, I don't feel like anyone's been like trying to target fans outside of the US, UK, and Australia more lately. So I wouldn't say that.
Hmm. Um, and my other kind of pet theory is this, like, why are we seeing more of this kind of content? I'm like, and I think that it's a lot of, if you go back like 15 years ago, not like that was like a glorious time for online wrestling news consumption, but uh it seems like we've just got a like the remaining wrestling aggregators have um their quality has dipped, I guess. I mean, obviously I can speak from experience, like Wrestling Inc. is a completely different site than it was a few years ago because it was sold to a big company that has really tried to is really only focused on like SEO engagements and clicks and clickbaity kind of stuff. And I think that's just kind of an example of like that the stuff they're looking for is the quick like can we put a famous wrestler's name in our SEO? And can we game that? Um, and so I think like the quality of aggregation sites has declined in some way, which kind of is what triggers towards this. I mean, and this goes right down to like the Observer site. Like maybe you'll disagree, but like I saw the Observer site had an article today that said John Cena Sr. praises John Cena's match against AJ Styles at Crown Jewel. So, and I just feel like that's something that you wouldn't see on the Observer site like a few years ago. Like a comment from somebody who has like zero relevance to pro wrestling outside of being John Cena's dad, commenting on thinking that his son had a good wrestling match a month ago. And I understand that the article only exists because you can put John Cena's name in it a few times, um, which is probably very helpful for SEO purposes. But just like that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Like we wouldn't see that a few years ago on the Observer sites, but because we're in this kind of like craven hellscape of news media, in algorithms and SEO optimization that's now kind of trickling down where that seems to be like news stories that now we the fans are seeing on a regular basis if you're spending any time online. And I feel like that's making us feel dumber.
Yeah, and the Observer site also has the whole thing where I mean, they've been going in the current form for almost a decade, but they're years behind a lot of the other long-running sites in terms of SEO
Hmm.
because, for so long you had Dave posting direct to the sites and you had the headlines like raw rating was and then the entire body of the post was, a number. So, like they're behind the likes of Wrestling Inc. and others that have been around a long time, like WrestleZone, in terms of long term building that kind of thing. But yeah, that is not something I would have expected on the Observer site, really, even now. Um, I just, I, but it's it's a balance. It's trying to play the game. And then, most of these places don't pay very well. Some pay better than others. So it's all about chasing traffic. And chasing traffic gets you to places like John Cena Sr. talks about John Cena on the lead up to John Cena's last match, etc.
Yeah, the post
Um,
should just be John Cena's name over
yeah.
and over and over again.
So for what it's worth, I pulled up because it was the one you mentioned, Wrestling Inc.
Yeah.
on SimilarWeb. So their country share of traffic to the site, US is 64%. Number two is UK with about 9.5. Then Spain at almost 8. Canada at 4.25. Ireland at just under 2%.
Okay, so yeah, I mean that's different than what I remember looking at, and obviously the site has changed, and I would have waged that the people's the numbers are more accurate now than they were in the past. So, but yeah, basically English speaking countries, and for some reason Spain.
Yeah, I was surprised to see that
A
one.
lot of A Kid News, or whatever his name is in WWE.
Axiom.
Axiom, yeah,
Yeah.
they're dying to get the latest Axiom scoops. Um,
Just real quick to pull up another one, I tried WrestlingNews.co. They are, similar in terms of that it starts with like 2/3 and then goes into single digits. US, Canada, UK, Germany, India.
yeah.
So India did make the top 5 on WrestlingNews.co. So, by the way, though, like one thing I've noticed lately, and I'm not going to name sites, and I'm curious if you've seen this. I've and I understand using it as a tool, and I don't necessarily think in the cases I saw the articles are AI, but I think there are people using AI transcribers and not fixing the errors. Because there was some obvious like homophones that I saw that any human actually checking over the quote would have noticed, and that I don't think any actual wrestling fan would have made the mistake of if they were transcribing it entirely themselves. So I don't know. But I'm wary about AI in general after the Sportskeeda stuff last year.
You should everyone everywhere should be wary of AI. Anyone that has any focus on news consumption should have fears and concerns about AI. Um, and I would say it wouldn't surprise me at all that if every site in some way is using AI to help with copy in some way, shape, or form. Um, I would think that it's hard for me to say this because I used to feel like this is a very common thing I assume as most people. I used to feel like I knew what like young people were doing now, and now that I'm over 30, I feel like I've lost it a little bit. But I would assume that most young people, like people in their late teens, early 20s, are using AI with incredible frequency compared to someone like myself.
Which,
Um,
which is just insane how people have become so reliant on it when it's
and
Gen AI as we know it has only been around like 2 years.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I mean, like relying on it. So like if they're relying on it, oh, like AI, write me like a 3 paragraph news blurb about this news story and giving a link to some other aggregated site or something like that. And then
Yeah.
suddenly you have a 3 paragraph thing about Bret Hart's comments on so and so or whatever. Rikishi thinks. Rikishi's a big one for getting his name aggregated. Rikishi thinks that someone related to Rikishi should be pushed more, is usually the summarization of his comments. But it's funny. Like I went to a journalism conference 2 weekends ago, and it was kind of for younger journalists. I was one of the older people there. A lot of people there were like in their early 20s, kind of like a year or two into their career. I'm about 10 years in, so I was like kind of like an old person there. But they talked
How old are
about
you now?
I'm 31.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, geez. Now that sounds young to me. That's
yeah,
horrifying.
but right. So I know that's young to a lot of people, but I'm just talking from like a career perspective. I went to this thing and there was a lot of people that were like early 20s, is what I
Right,
would
right,
say.
right.
And someone asked like, "Oh, who uses like AI tools?" And like all of the younger people are like, "Oh yeah, I use Otterly." Are you familiar with Otterly?
I think I've heard the name, and that's about it.
So, I hope I'm saying it right. It's either Otter or Otterly. I'm pretty sure it's Otterly, but it is an AI transcribing tool. Um,
And like there is value to that
oh
because,
yeah, and they were all like,
and
"Oh, it's like a lifesaver. It's the thing that I use. I couldn't do anything without it." Um,
and that's also much more machine learning than Gen AI. Like we
yeah,
do need to make the distinction that there are cool like machine learning uses of AI that are genuinely useful, and if
Mhm.
they continue along the same path they are, will continue to be useful and get better.
Mhm.
Like I don't mind the idea of using, there's always been transcription software. It just now they have the machine learning to augment it. I don't mind someone using a machine learning AI app to do transcription as long as they are carefully checking it, just because, or even just reading it as it's transcribing it, because like hand transcribing and going back and like it is a pain. It takes much longer than just listening to it. I don't mind anyone doing that. um but
Yeah, and I'm not saying
but
it as like a good or a bad thing. I'm pointing out that I think like everyone in this cohort of younger journalists was like saying they used it, and I was like, I don't even know what you guys are talking about. These gizmos that you guys are using to transcribe things. And I'm familiar with transcribing software. I wasn't familiar with this one, and that this one had become kind of a standard that many journalists were using.
yeah, I thought that like Stage Whisper, whatever it's called, was like supposed to be like the main like journalisty one.
Yeah, perhaps it is, but amongst this cohort of people that I was talking to, Otterly seemed to be the big one.
Mm.
Um, but anyway, like, and like, not to there's no really no way for me to say this without obviously, and at least I'll acknowledge this is a very broad generalization of people of a certain generation. But I would wager that a lot of people that are working in the news aggregation game, who are the people hustling around for these sites, are young people, like people in
Yeah.
their early 20s, like people trying to get their a foothold in journalism. Um, And it wouldn't surprise me at all if a lot of these people are relying on AI tools, just from a demographic perspective. I know how old the people are that are generally working in kind of the news aggregation industry. And I also think I know at least a little bit how often these people rely on AI. Whether or not that's having like a direct impact on like what feels like a lot of stupidity. I don't really know, but when you note like seeing like a lot of like things errors that would like probably be picked up by a human, but if you're just transcribing and copy and pasting, maybe not.
I mean, I think it could be a factor just because, you know, all these generative AIs do is imitate. So, especially knowing how many bots and stuff there are on social media, like I'm sure that there are bots that, even if that's not what they're designed for, just imitating negativity about whatever drives traffic.
Yeah, and it's pretty granular, like the way it can imitate things. Like I remember people were posting like that they were talking about the Flagship Wrestling podcast, and they were like, have Rich and Joe argue about like this topic. And the AI did a pretty good job of like representing both Rich and Joe's kind of like personalities. And that was kind of alarming for me because like I wouldn't describe Rich and Joe as like famous people. Like like the fact that it could get that granular and like its impressions, I thought was kind of like alarming.
Now, this was without the person who did the prompt, like doing anything to kind of nudge it, in as far as their personalities.
I don't think so. I don't know what the prompt specifically was. And this I'm kind of just saying this as a memory, but it was like, they typed it into presumably ChatGPT or someone else, like, you know, have Rich and Joe from the Flagship argue about like, what's the best flavor of ice cream? And then like,
I thought you were going to say puppets, but continue.
no, no, then it would actually have something direct to mind from. But it was just getting the cadence correctly. Like, and I knew you could do that with like if I chose like famous people that would have a lot of like oh, like have like Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger talk about something in like at least like famous impressionable people. But the fact that it could get to like just two guys with a semi well-known podcast was kind of alarming. in terms of its ability to imitate kind of just regular average people. Um, but that's kind of beside the point. But I think that part of it is also to shift gears a little bit. There's clearly a huge um well, let me go back in time for a second. Wrestling in general has the American wrestling system, right? The weekly television professional wrestling has no off season. In the case of WWE and AEW, you're talking about multiple weekly shows each week. Um, and I think it's largely exhausting to follow. Like I was talking about this with someone the other day. Like I generally really enjoy Dynamite each week. I usually when I finish watching Dynamite, I say, "Wow, that was a good show. I'm glad I watched it." But still, having this thing that happened every 2 hours, every week for 2 hours, and I'm just like, oh man, Dynamite's on again. Oh, I gotta watch that. Like I've just got other stuff going on in my life and other things that I want to do. That's hard for me to enthusiastically carve out time to watch pro wrestling every week. And I do think that that plays a role in the way we kind of discuss pro wrestling because I think in some ways watching, especially if you're at like if you're very online and engaged in different circles, whether it's listening to podcasts or going on a Discord or scrolling through social media or whatever, like almost like interest in wrestling is more of this social thing that you do online as opposed to something that you watch. And that leads to us almost talking about a lot of stupid things because we're spending time with engaging in discourse as opposed to like watching and forgetting it.
Hmm.
Like I talked about this, like I think I wrote an article about this, but it was like when I first got into professional wrestling, I watched SmackDown on UPN on I don't know, Thursday nights, I think it was on because it's moved around so much, but I think it was on Thursday nights. And I watched it, and then I maybe like talked about it with a couple friends at school the next day. But that was pretty much the extent of my pro wrestling like um interactions. And so like I kind of just talked about, oh, did you see what happened on SmackDown? Oh yeah, like the Undertaker did this. That was cool. But when in today's modern environment, if you're on social media, like you watch an episode of television and you are maybe while you're watching it, you're engaging in discussion with it with people online. Maybe the next day you're listening to one or two podcasts reviewing the show. Maybe you're going onto a Discord server and reading what everyone has to say. And it's just a massive, massive amount of discussion and information as opposed to pre-social media where it was really you just watched wrestling and maybe talked about it with somebody you might know, or maybe you read the Observer or a newsletter that comes out once a week. It seems like, and this is true for any hobby, it's not unique to wrestling, but if this is the thing you're into, it is the thing that is dominating discussions. And because you're engaged all the time, you end up kind of talking about maybe really granular, minute details on a show. Maybe you're talking about some negative trend that you've identified. Like the discussions are way more both in depth, but also kind of like wayward and far reaching. And it ends up kind of focusing on maybe some annoying subjects.
Hmm.
I don't know if I vocalize that correctly.
I mean, I get where you're going with this. So, I mean, where do you want me to spin off of that?
Do you think that like, I don't know, just like, do you think that being like the way people watch and consume wrestling and the way it isn't people are engaging with it on a day-to-day basis is having a negative impact on what people focus on when they're talking about wrestling?
I think it has to some degree. I think the question is just how much. Um,
Like if someone points out something, if you're on a Discord server and somebody
mhm.
points out like, oh man, they're doing this entrance again, and this is a stupid entrance, and here's why. And someone else chimes in and says, yeah, I think that is a stupid entrance. I'm glad you pointed it out because I can't stand it. And then slowly, if it's like a certain tight-knit community, like that will gain some steam within your community. And then all of a sudden, all you're doing is talking about this entrance and how you think it's stupid. And every time it comes on TV, you're like, oh, it's that stupid entrance. And it just kind of negatively influences discourse. where if you were not as plugged in all the time with other people talking about wrestling, you probably wouldn't even notice that the entrance. Just to give an example.
And it depends. Like I'm trying to. I get where you're going. I'm just trying to apply it in my head to what can I think of that is similar. I mean, certainly there's stuff that I would maybe not notice unless people pointed it out to me. But I don't necessarily think I'm in the boat where it necessarily would have changed how I was already watching.
Hmm. Yeah, it's not for everybody. Not everyone is going to be as in depth, but I think it plays a role in like I think any content creator, no matter what you're doing, you could be an author, you could be a filmmaker, you could be a wrestling booker. Your content's you're not designing your content with the idea that people are going to discuss it every single day and critique it or praise it every single day and think about it all the time. But I think the nature of the way the modern person finds their social circles online has led to, in shared interests has led to that being the case.
I think that's fair. Um,
And this is not unique to wrestling at all. It's true for anything. It just happens. This is a wrestling podcast, so that's something that unites us and what we're brings people together in this sphere. And I think that it's just kind of it's exhausting to participate in.
I feel like for me, it's only exhausting with people who just are just life and death about something. I don't know if I would necessarily call it exhausting otherwise.
Right, if you're
But
interacting with some absolutionists or emotion like really emotional people, um, which is kind of true across the board. Um,
yeah, not just wrestling, certainly. I guess the big question is really is what we've been seeing, and you got at this at the beginning, I think, but we didn't really talk about it yet. Is this a wrestling specific problem, or is it just wrestling illustrating something that's going on in all like hardcore fandoms, and maybe it's worse in wrestling than a lot of other fandoms, but it's not necessarily a wrestling specific problem.
yeah, I don't think it is a wrestling specific problem. I think like my other interests, like I really like basketball and the NBA. Like I think a lot of the discussion there has just gotten really stupid too. And I think a lot of that is for a number of different reasons. I think that news aggregation is a major factor in that. I think that there's simultaneously more of a space for intellectual discussion because you have like different types of communities of like-minded people that you would never find elsewhere if it wasn't for the internet. But there's
Yeah.
also
Like for example, I just to jump in real quick,
yeah,
like I think right now, the last couple of years, we're at an all-time high for like really high quality, like Observer Hall of Fame content.
right. So like when you and that's great, but at the same time, because the flip side of everyone being connected is yes, you can find these pockets of people that really feel intellectual or think about things the way you do, or at least have the same kind of approach to how they view this hobby. But you're also, because you're connected with everyone, dealing with like the lowest common denominator that is largely driving what news sites are focusing on to run for stories, what kind of traffic, what your algorithm is going to pick up. It's going to be like the you're both getting access to like really cool communities, but also subjected to the whims of the masses in a way that maybe you wouldn't have been pre-internet.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Um, I wanted to bring this up like, and we're talking about like wrestlers themselves. We talk about this kind of a lot. Like, I think people lament this if they think, oh, like why do you think a wrestler today, a 22-year-old person, becomes a wrestler? What do you think are
Hmm.
like the main motivating factors?
Specifically, someone who goes to wrestling school and starts on the indies.
I just think like your average wrestler. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I feel like someone picking like getting recruited by WWE out of whatever sport
Yeah.
is a different, and there are enough of them that I wanted to make sure. I mean, why did I think they become a wrestler? Because they love it, and some of them maybe think they can turn into a big star or something out of it. But I think primarily they were a big fan and they want to be a pro wrestler, and they've always wanted to be a pro wrestler. Like, I think it's
Mhm.
still that. I think it's been mainly that for, the last 25 years at least. But
Why,
go ahead.
like, why do you think they want to be a pro wrestler, though?
So what are you trying to dial down into exactly?
Like, what motivates somebody to become a pro wrestler? Is it because they want to, like, they're artists that want to perform this art that they've been watching for their own whole lives? Or are they chasing money? Are they chasing fame? Are they chasing social media clout? Um, I think those are really interesting questions because I think a mistake I certainly have made and a lot of people have made is that, like, someone that gets into wrestling right now is super passionate about the art of professional wrestling and wants to create amazing, high quality work.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like a small percentage of wrestlers. And certainly a small percentage of wrestlers at the highest level. I think there are some people, I think there are people like Kenny Omega or Will Ospreay or Mercedes Moné that genuinely want to create like art at the highest level. It feels to me like a majority of wrestlers are more focused on I want to make money, I want to have a big platform, and I want to be famous. And specifically, the platform and the fame aspect to me feels like a bigger driving force, almost more than anything. And I think that leads to a lot of like kind of strange behaviors we see with people.
In
Um,
terms of like what? In terms of like what they think will get them positive social media attention and stuff?
yeah, I think like if you were a wrestler, why would you ever say anything bad about AEW or Tony Khan publicly if you didn't like maybe if you worked for them and you have a grudge or whatever, that's one thing. But why would you ever, like, if you were a wrestler, you would look at it and say, like, well, this is one of the two places that can pay me a lot of money to work there. So I'm going to be on my best behavior in terms of being diplomatic towards them. That's the logical thing that a person would do, right? If there's two places that can really pay you really well, you would be focused on trying to maintain, at least publicly, um, a positive relationship with both companies.
Yeah.
Yet we see plenty of people, especially whether they're current or former WWE wrestlers, or retired legends or people that could maybe be in use of a payday from someone like Tony Khan, uh, and they just kind of like will slam AEW, and I wonder how much of that is for it doesn't make any sense from a financial or professional perspective, but it would make sense if you wanted to get some backpacks on social media and you wanted to have some clout and you wanted to get your name on these aggregated sites. And I feel like that's kind of a motivation for some of these people, more so than I certainly don't think a lot of people are getting into wrestling to create high art, especially at the highest level.
No,
Um,
I think a lot are not. I feel like with the social media thing you were talking about, I think the most interesting, like specific example is, it's someone who's currently in WWE, but is young enough that when he did this, it was an interesting example of it. The Javon Evans comments about Tony Khan, which
yeah.
were when was that? That was in May. Okay, that was 6 months ago. Um, the responding to Ricochet, which I'm trying to remember. What did Ricochet even say that set him off? I'm trying to
Oh, it's just
remember.
like he said, yeah, he said something about Ricochet like wrestling in front of empty buildings or something like that.
No, but there was something before it, I think.
Oh,
But he
quick,
ends up
go.
calling Tony Khan a crackhead and talking about AEW attendance, and it's just like, isn't he like 21?
Hmm.
Like, why are you doing this? why are you like you? Yes, WWE is pushing you right now, although they seem to have this, well, he's young, he'll always be here attitude. But like, you're young enough, and you also, I mean, you did do shots there at times, as extra work. Like, why are you just completely risking future work with the other company like that?
Right. Like the logical business approach to it would be to say nothing at least. And not call one of the two people that can pay you a lot of money to become a professional, to be a professional wrestler, a crackhead. Um,
Yeah.
I would advise against that. Um, Not that I'm an agent or anything like that. The and that's kind of a good example because it's also like, why do you think he said that, Biggs?
I think he thinks he's going to be in WWE forever for whatever reason.
Yes,
I think he certainly has that impression.
which would be a foolish thing to believe based on WWE
Everything.
history.
Yes.
Do you think that that is the message, the Tony Khan is a crackhead or shitting on AEW is a message that is reaffirmed by other people that work for WWE?
100%.
Yeah, I would say that that's probably almost, we pretty much have proof that that's the case. Um, and so, as an impressionable younger wrestler, is this mimicking the behavior of maybe older veteran said in the locker room one time or anything like that? That would seem likely as well.
I think so. I don't know if the word crackhead is necessarily what would have been used, but yes,
There was
I
Ariel
think that's
Helwani
likely.
backstage. That would be
Yeah,
a big
yeah,
indicator if that was
exactly.
used or not. Um,
So yeah, it's like what motivates someone like that? I don't know. Like
and
especially also like you're in NXT, you're not making great money. Like we don't know exactly what he's making, but I think the belief at this point is what that the most anyone on a developmental deal is getting paid is about 100,000.
yeah, I mean, I think it's hard for me to say because there's probably some special circumstances for people if there was a bidding war over somebody's services, which,
Right, but by and large, like, and I don't mean this as a shot at him because as Jay Malachi, he was a very valued prospect when he was just on the indies. Like he was
mhm.
a guy that if you saw him, you knew he was going to be something.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing extremely well for himself given his age and experience. There's no denying that.
Yeah, it just is it just being young and stupid? Like,
Like, it would be different if someone like Randy Orton said the same comments because he's Randy Orton. He's already made millions and millions
yes,
of dollars. He is someone that has reason to believe that he probably will be in WWE forever.
yes.
Um, but when you see these kind of younger wrestlers like in make what I would say like mistakes are like what are their motivations for? And I think like in other eras of wrestling, the motivator for being in professional wrestling was money for the most part. There was always the extra caveat of like it's great to have fans cheering for you and the lifestyle appeal to certain people. I know Dave has always said that like wrestling was about like you never get to you get to act like you're in high school all the time. You never have to grow up because you can just, ride around from town to town, going out, partying with people, hooking up with women, and like there's not really a lot of accountability with anything and something you can't really do in most jobs, but you can do it in pro wrestling. And that's like stuff that appealed to people, but it was mostly about making money. You wanted to make money, you wanted to work main event programs, you were jealous of your spot because if you lost your spot, that meant less money. You were fighting with different promoters, you were jumping around from territory to territory or promotion to promotion. Money was the main driving force behind why these people became wrestlers. Um,
And the money, I think we should stress was, I mean, certainly if you were a top guy or at the next level down, better on the territory level than I think it usually gets credit for.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Especially when you adjust for inflation and stuff like that.
yeah, I'm trying to find. There's one example that I've always found very telling. As I'm trying to look real quick. Here we go. That it's from when Chris Colt and Ron Dupree were working the Kingsport, Tennessee territory when that was its own territory when it was like 3 or 4 weekly towns plus maybe some spot towns mixed in. And they wrote this letter to Jack Pfeffer that we have from the Jack Pfeffer collection, where they're writing him and explaining what they're making at the moment.
What time period is this? Like the mid 70s?
This is 67, August
Okay.
67.
Yeah.
And talking about the money they're making and how they want to make more. So, okay, so they are each making $200 a week in a short trip territory where they're usually working 4 nights a week. And when I mean say short trip, I mean, most of these are in the same metro area, and usually
you can live at home.
Yeah, you can. You don't have to stay in a hotel. Yeah, they had a handful of spot towns. So okay, $200 a week in August 1967. So let's see. So let's go to the CPI inflation calculator. So that's okay. So 200 in August 1967, and that did not put in the year correctly for me. 1967. There we go. That's almost $2,000 a week in today's money.
Mm-hmm.
And this is for headlining one of the smallest territories in the country, and one where you don't have nearly the same travel expenses as most other territories.
Yeah, so you're looking at 100,000 a year, basically.
Yes.
In today's money. And I think, like, especially when we talk about like Javon Evans and younger wrestlers, like there's always like an immaturity aspect to this, right? Someone that was 21 said something stupid that they shouldn't have done. Like we've all been there and things like that.
There is, but I mean, I can tell you there, and I'm not going to name names because it would get me in way too much trouble. But like, there are people on the indies these days that have some weird ideas about how they can turn this into a career. I'm talking about, like, how do I best explain this? There are people, and I would say, at least from that, I've heard about more women than men, but I believe there are definitely men who are in this boat too, where they're basically like, they're convinced that they can get signed off of being extras, but don't really take indie dates beyond that for the most part. They work a very bare bones indie schedule where maybe you hear about them wrestling at most once every month or two.
Mm-hmm. And so they're looking to turn somebody's head with their look.
Yes. Yeah. So they'll make sure that they get booked, for AEW extra work, for WWE extra work, but they're not actually really working indie shows, and don't seem to realize that they're unlikely to actually get a job unless they're actually wrestling, like,
right. But is wrestling what they wanted to, is wrestling what they want to do?
That's part of where I'm going with that. It's like, I don't know, but it's something that I've heard about the last few years, where I think it does show that there is, among the people who are going to wrestling schools and breaking in on the indies, that as much as you would think those people, or like to think those people, are getting weeded out early on, the show up to wrestling school and on the first day ask, when am I showing up on SmackDown type, is going to and graduating wrestling school. They're not just being weeded out.
Hey, if they're willing to pay, they're going to graduate their wrestling school.
But you know what I mean, though. Like, everyone who owns or is a trainer at a wrestling school can tell you a story like that, and tell you stories of it happening regularly.
And I do think that when we talk about like someone like, now Javon Evans, I would actually say is like kind of an exception in the sense of like he seems like someone that generally wants to be a great pro wrestler. Maybe he's just naturally talented. He's really good at it. But I would say that's like, this is a guy that could eventually be considered one of the best in-ring wrestlers in the whole world. And
it's also kind of disappointing with him because, like, I'm not going to get too far into this because, I'm friends with some of them, but like, you would think, based on the kind of people he was associating with on the indies and working with and working for, you would not really expect him to have that kind of personality type either.
Like to be like a defend WWE kind of person.
Yeah, you would not expect him to be like this very extra, tweeting through it like
Well,
tribal type.
this we learned this lesson with I think Seth Rollins like years ago when Seth Rollins was he got in that feud with like Will Ospreay, um, like I don't know, like back in like 2018
Well, because
maybe.
if you are arguably the best guy in WWE, you're gonna assume you're the best guy in the world.
But there was this thing where like Rollins basically like he got in this feud with Will Ospreay and basically was like, we've got all the best talent in the world. We're WWE. You know, oh, you think you're good? Well, we've got ironically Ricochet at the time who can do everything you can do but better. So, we're the best. And there's one thing to be confident, there's another thing to be like really arrogant and punching down at all these people.
Yeah.
And at the time, a lot of people were like, like Seth, worked Ring of Honor and worked all these indie dates and worked against all of these guys that are still on the indies or still in Ring of Honor. And this is before AEW even started. And it's like,
Well,
he's
also
not,
owns a wrestling school,
yeah, but
and
it's
at the
like,
time, by the way, like he was still like he was. I would say he was still like actively in the ring training the students on his off days until
yeah.
really the last few years. So like this is someone with like deep current indie connections.
Yeah, and just like it's kind of like, oh man, like it's one thing if like again like Randy Orton or like some old retired wrestler is like shitting on these guys, and it's like it's kind of weird that it's like Seth Rollins, someone who came from that environment that shared the ring with, Bryan Danielson or Kenny Omega, it would be saying this kind of stuff, but it's how a lot of people do view wrestling. I remember like
Well, also, wait, what am I saying? Like, I don't know if he technically has ownership or if technically Marek Brave is the owner, but I mean, he has an independent
yes,
promotion.
he is someone that's connected. Yes, he's training wrestlers now. And then like I remember like it was a realization I had with Kevin Owens, which was like Kevin Owens, and he's come out and said this, so I'm not like projecting anything. Like his dream was to be a WWE superstar. His dream was to be wrestling on Raw and have JR call his matches and to interact with Steve Austin and to work for Vince. And I think there was like when they did like a WWE 24 WrestleMania thing, there was, do you remember the thing where like Kevin Owens like he had a match with WrestleMania and he went behind the curtain and
With
Vince,
Jericho,
yeah, I think
and
so.
Vince was like, I didn't like it.
And like Kevin Owens like crestfallen that Vince just wasn't a huge fan of his WrestleMania match. And it just like and it was just kind of like I was like, okay, this is a guy who, despite the fact was, an indie wrestler for years and years and was
Was the
this
guy who Cody Rhodes went to for advice on how to
yeah,
become an indie wrestler.
was a great like in like it's like he even though he has this great, pedigree and he's PWG and he's great buddies with the Young Bucks and all this kind of stuff, like even though he's that guy, he's also like my dream is WWE, and that's the only place I really want to work. And that's been bared out since he's ever been signed by WWE. So you can walk into AEW anytime you want it.
Yeah, I mean, we know he's negotiated there too.
Right. Well, he's also not an idiot, so he's not gonna just blindly sign anything. But he views WWE as this is what he wants to do with his life. Despite, and I think a lot of times wrestling fans like me, um, we project our own feelings on wrestling onto these wrestlers, where it's like, okay, if I really like indie wrestling like I did in the 2010s, I assume all these indie wrestlers that I'm watching that are doing all this cool stuff that they would never be able to do in WWE have my same kind of format, which is like, yeah, fuck the Fed. But realistically, a lot of people are like, yeah, my dream is to work for WWE. And it's a very powerful dream that they have. And I wanted to kind of touch on this, like, so when we talk about like Javon Evans and like people of that age, so like I don't think it's a secret, like a lot of people like Gen Zers want to become like influencers. That's like the dream job for anyone like under the age of like 25.
Hmm.
Like, and every generation kind of has this. Like I remember when I was in high school, like there was a big thing which is like, one out of every four kids thinks they're going to be a reality TV star. That was a big thing, was a reality TV star, which is kind of like the early phase of being an influencer. Um, but a lot of these people, their dream job is not necessarily, I want to be a pro wrestler. It's, I want to be an influencer. I want to have a lot of social media followers. I want to get a lot of likes and backpacks on Twitter or Instagram or wherever I am. I want to have sponsorships through there. I want to just be one of those people. And I think that is getting a lot of people. So when you talk about like,
Well, and also, and if mainly if you're a woman, we now know that if you end up outside the company, you have a ridiculously strong following to use as a base for an OnlyFans or something like that.
yeah, and I think there's a lot of with the women it goes into a lot of things. There's also just more limited opportunities to make big money outside of WWE or AEW if you're a woman wrestler.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's cool. So when you're talking about the people who like are like the wrestling school people who are taking the extra work and working very sparingly, I think that is their goal to be this great individual professional wrestler? Probably not. It's probably to be this like it's probably like I want to be famous.
Yes.
And wrestling is a way for me to become famous. And so I become famous, I can become a social media influencer. And even if I kind of wash out as a wrestler, I can make a living doing what I really want to do, which is being a professional Instagram model. And you can make
And
you
and I mean, one thing that I think really shows that is, did you, okay, when it became a whole controversy, did you see any of the photos that the now former Mandy Rose was posting on her pre-OnlyFans thing?
you know what, Bix, I know people might not believe this, but I did not see any of those photos. And I mean that sincerely.
Okay, so I bring this up for a specific reason, though. She was getting all of, this business and these subscribers. She was applying no production value to it. Because, like, what is the thing that, if you follow the likes of a Shazza McKenzie or other indie wrestlers who do well on OnlyFans,
Hmm.
what is the thing you hear from them constantly? Like, this is work. You are, in terms of photo shoots and making, and then paying for people to do the lighting and the professional photos and
Oh,
just all that
I,
stuff.
I think being an influencer would be very difficult and exhausting, and it would get
Right,
old very quickly.
right. So my point is that Mandy Rose, her stuff had no production values. Like, she was
Right, she
just
was just taking
shooting stuff
selfies
on
on her
her, yeah,
phone.
on her phone. Yeah, exactly. So, like, my point being, it shows that whatever, for the type of person who's gonna pay for that, whatever baseline expectations there might be for someone who does not have that level of celebrity is not really going to be there. So it also means that if you decide you want to do that, and if you do, more power to you, there's less overhead. There is, look, you're still having to make an effort and do photos and all that, but it's, you have a leg up besides just the number of fans. It's like they are willing to accept even a somewhat lower quality product.
Right, and I think like the fastest way to get a following on social media is to become famous somewhere else. And
Yes.
it seems I feel like there are a few places to get a faster following on social media than becoming a WWE wrestler. Because that's an enormously online fan base.
Yes.
WWE in particular, and I'm sure it's true for AEW and to a lesser extent other indie wrestlers and wrestlers in other promotions and things like that. But those fans love following people on social media, and especially if you're a woman, it's the easiest way. I think if you are, I want to say this with like respect. Obviously, we're two guys here, so I want to be like, I don't want to be as, uh, I want to be as respectful as possible, but if you are in this, I imagine it's there's a lot of extremely attractive women that probably could make a lot of money on OnlyFans if they were to get on a platform that lets a lot of people know who they are.
Yeah, right.
And
I mean, the
wrestling
draw
or
with OnlyFans that made it blow up bigger was the idea of, the idea of seeing someone you are familiar with
right,
naked. It's why, Mr. Skin is a thing, even though it's just, regular
right.
movies.
You could see a lot
It's
more nudity if you were just watching regular porn than if you were
Right.
watching
Nude.
Mr.
It's
Singer.
yeah. The draw beyond everything else, more than anything, has like there's always been the draw of seeing someone you are already a fan of, familiar with whatever, in a state of undress.
Mhm.
So
And
I think you said that in a perfectly reasonable way.
well, I'm glad I have your approval, Biggs. Uh,
Well,
but I guess my point is like, so it's attractive to go to WWE and to make yourself stand out, and to get us back to like kind of my original point, like, is that you're getting a lot of people that maybe don't understand the wrestling business, um, and you're getting them and putting them on a platform and getting them to say things, um,
yes, yes. I
and
think
that's what
that's
we're seeing,
yeah. I'm trying to think if the
right?
story that jumped to mind is something I should
Well,
actually
like what was
share. But
always
go ahead.
like what was always the knock that other wrestlers had on Bill Goldberg?
Didn't get wrestling mark for
Yeah.
himself, and
Besides the
also
fact that he was
shit attitude.
dangerous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But the idea was like, oh, he was just this football player that really didn't have any wrestling experience, and he got super famous super quick because he had a look, and the company did a really effective job pushing him. And he never really like learned what the business was like. And even at the end, when he's like complaining about, like,
Oh, some girl broke my record.
yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah, right. That was like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. He talks about like, yeah,
Yeah.
he's mad about Asuka, and it's like, dude, it's a fake record.
And also, they didn't even really hype it up like that in the first
Yeah.
place.
Also, he doesn't have the longest undefeated streak. I'm pretty sure like Luthez won like 950 matches in a row or something like that. Um, but in the fake kayfabe world, under Goldberg had an incredible streak. Um, Sid also nearly broke his record. I don't know if people remember that one. Um, but like it was an example like Bill Goldberg, right? He was always this guy who just like didn't understand the wrestling business, and he would say stuff, and he'd be like, "Well, he's like you say, he's a mark for himself. He doesn't understand that this is like fake pro wrestling." And are we, especially in WWE, which is, really aggressively, um, they've got this whole program where they find people from NXT, and they're just finding college athletes, and they're doing these NIL sponsorships. Um, and it's kind of like, ooh, like we can help you become more famous on social media. Do you remember the basketball twins from a couple of years ago who I haven't heard about?
The Cavender twins?
Yes, the Cavender twins. Remember they were like NIL, they were like original NIL deal people.
Yes.
And it was kind of like, well, are these people going to become professional wrestlers? They but that was probably just a way to leverage some more attention on them so they would get more social media followers, which is what I'm assuming they're doing. Maybe they're playing pro basketball somewhere. But I assume they're social media followers. They're just social media influencers these days. Um, but
I believe they are not with WWE anymore.
oh yeah, like I don't think I would be surprised if they ever took many bumps in the ring. But that was the idea, right? Which is like, let's get some people that we can feel like are marketable on social media, and it's kind of a win-win because WWE wants these people, and these people want to leverage at least some fleeting attention from WWE to help increase their social media followers, and that's attracting these people, and that is bringing these people into pro wrestling, and then there are, you know, maybe they're going to say something stupid. Maybe they are going to try to get ahead with WWE by slamming AEW somewhere. Um,
Which, again, the person who most visibly did that recently was an indie wrestler who,
yes, with someone who did that. But
yeah.
I guess my point is just in general, you're bringing a lot of people into the industry that don't have an inherent passion for it, and also kind of don't really know it any better, and they're going to a company in a breeding ground at the performance center that I don't know is an effective place to learn the ins and outs of the actual wrestling business. Um, do you think they're learning in NXT how to get indie bookings if they don't make it in wrestling?
I don't think so, no. Um,
What do you think they're hearing about the indies or other wrestling promotions uh, in NXT at the performance center?
from the coaches or from the other talent?
From both sides.
From the other talent, I think it depends on who. Like, I would think, like, I mean, look, I doubt Ethan Page is in like classes and stuff. I think
Yeah.
he's there to be a veteran on TV. Like, I've never asked anyone just because it didn't seem like there was even a point in asking. But like I would think if they're asking Ethan Page, I mean, again, someone who has an independent promotion,
Hmm.
like I would think he would be fairly positive. I would
Yeah,
think,
it would depend on the person, but my takeaway would be that it's probably viewed as pretty negative, in a negative light overall.
which is weird when you have not NIL, ID now.
Do we still have ID? Like,
Yeah, they just signed new people. They
yeah,
announced it on Evolve like a week ago.
yeah, that was something that I'm not surprised it hasn't worked out the way it did because it is a lot of it a fundamental misunderstanding of the indie scene and things like that. Um, but I think you bring these people in and they have this kind of attitude towards pro wrestling and I think it kind of contributes to I think a lot of negative space. And you end up
Yeah,
people saying silly things. And on the flip side, you also have people that should really know better, but maybe because I don't know, they still view WWE as the prime place to work. Like two people that come to mind are Gail Kim and Rob Van Dam. So I'm sure most people are familiar with the Gail Kim conversation, um, which I don't really want to rehash, but just in general, like would seem foolish for Gail Kim to a place where maybe she could make a good living in an environment where there's not a lot of good places to work in pro wrestling. Kind of weird to burn a bridge there, but whatever. But then like Rob Van Dam, do you remember like Rob Van Dam commenting on like the ECW shows that AEW was running?
I forget what he said.
Let me pull I want to pull that up correctly, and I'm sure one of the fine aggregators will have uh something which Rob Van Dam, who by the way, worked a date for AEW, and Tony Khan paid for Walk to be his entrance theme song. Yeah, so on April 9th, 2005, he said that AEW, he didn't like their style of wrestling. It relies too much on shock value and it takes away from the value of traditional in-ring storytelling. Master in-ring storyteller, Rob Van Dam. Definitely not a guy that just did cool moves and relied on shock value. Um, and kind of like talked about like being kind of like, oh, they did these shows at the 2300 Arena and it was kind of like an insult to ECW and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, Rob Van Dam, you can't say he's not this ignorant kid, or a person who's kind of coming into wrestling and not knowing any better. He's a veteran that's worked for many, many different promotions. He's been in WWE's good graces before. He's been out of WWE's good graces before. He really knows the game. Yet he's like, yeah, I'll just bury AEW. Who cares? And it's like at the time I remember people joking, and it's like, Rob, like Tony Khan is literally the richest ECW fan of all time, and he owns a wrestling promotion, and has already paid you presumably quite well to do a shot and put you on TV, and I think put you over, uh, and paid for the licensing the Pantera song for you to come out to. And it's like, why on earth would you insult this guy? Like, what? There's zero upside to you for you to do that,
And
except
he wasn't even really getting in arguments with people or anything. It wasn't like a heated thing. It was just, he just went off one day, like on his
yeah,
podcast, I think.
yeah, it was on his podcast, and it was like, why would you say that? Like, what motivates somebody? And the only thing I can think of is he's trying to score some points so he can go back to get a new Legends deal with WWE or get a coaching job or do something in WWE, which is what he views as the big leagues. Even though I'm sure Tony Khan would be happy to pay him to do shit. It just doesn't make any sense, and it
I
helps triggers a
I
lot
don't
of
know.
these conversations.
Yeah, I don't know. In his case, like I don't know because it was very out of the blue, especially for someone who had been there and to pick the criticisms that he had. Like he wasn't taking issue with like the locker room vibe or anything. Like it
Yeah.
it
He
like
said the kind of things that the same people say all the time, which about
right. And if
AEW,
like
which
if
is
you
like
that was a
no
problem,
psychology, just moves.
yeah. So was that a problem for you before or after you did work there?
Yeah, when you showed up kind of for a random match, kind of out of the blue. Um,
Yeah, his was really random. I'm not sure what I make of that. I mean, but he is someone with a podcast and stuff, so like, is it Is it the attention economy? I don't know.
And kind of speaking of the attention economy and kind of the interesting aspect of all this is, and you mentioned at the very beginning when we talked about like the news aggregation and kind of thing, is that we are now in the wrestling podcasts and wrestling podcasts in particular are a major part of the industry. Um, and especially for the aggregation sites, they are huge sources for stories that they're going to publish. Um, but the kind of the remarkable thing about wrestling that makes it a little bit different than a lot of other popular forms of entertainment and how they're covered is that a majority of the most popular wrestling podcasts are like older wrestlers telling stories or commenting on things or history kind of based podcasts. And they are not the podcasts that are discussing wrestling now. And if they are, it's almost always in a negative light.
Yeah.
And I find that very strange. Like there's tons of NBA podcasts out there, and there are plenty of NBA podcasts that are maybe old NBA players talking about, oh, the good old days of basketball used to be like this. Now the players are, they're doing too much load management, all this kind of stuff. That certainly exists, but they're not the most popular podcasts. But the wrestling podcasting is dominated by old people. I'm just gonna, I've got this.
You're gonna pull up the iTunes wrestling chart.
Yes, I'm going to pull up the iTunes wrestling chart. Because it's very intuitive. So number one, the most popular podcast according to iTunes is Jim Cornette's Drive Through, which kind of tells you everything you need to know.
Yes. Number 2 right now is Insight with Chris Van Vliet.
So does he have just wrestling people on, or does he kind of do other like
I'm fairly
guests?
sure that whatever non-wrestling stuff he does at this point is not part of that feed.
Okay, so that's just him interviewing wrestlers,
Yes.
usually problematic wrestlers.
Oh, you mean like that week where he interviewed 3 wrestlers and
Yeah.
they were all very problematic?
Yeah, what did he? Yeah, what was his game? I think
It
that
was
the week he
Matt
interviewed
Riddle,
Riddle.
Moose,
Yeah.
and Patrick Clark.
Yeah, there. Like Patrick Clark. I mean, jeez.
Yes, in the interview where he was like, "Well, so was the nude photo that those guys had of you real?" And he was like, "Yes." Do you know how they got it? Then I don't know. It was act, and then just letting that.
Yeah,
hang out.
I'm not gonna lie, Bix. I skipped that episode of Insight with Chris Van Vliet. I know I usually don't miss an
Which by the
episode.
way, he deleted that from YouTube at some point.
The Patrick Clark one.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So, but at least for the most part, Chris Van Vliet, from my understanding, is that he's interviewing contemporary wrestlers.
Yes. Yes. So
So,
that's
so,
number 2.
so then we got something to wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, which of course is
Well, technically something to wrestle with John Layfield right now, but
okay, but is also old wrestler, talks about things.
and is more. But at least in the time that it built up its following, it's much more a nostalgia show.
Yeah, it was a history podcast. It was Conrad reading The Observer and Bruce calling Dave Meltzer a liar about that week, whatever happened that week. Then we're followed by Busted Open, which is a podcast in the sense that it talks about like wrestling now, but is largely like old wrestlers talk about
As the
things.
co-hosts and stuff, and like you have some newer wrestlers mixed in. Like I guess Thunder Rose is still technically part
Yeah.
of it, but it's mainly WWE affiliated.
It feels like
old
it's Bully
guys.
Ray's show now.
Yeah.
At least from when we're in the context that we're talking about, which is like what is making headlines from Busted Open. It's usually Bully Ray says this.
Yes.
Um, Deadlock, which is also my understanding is a nostalgia podcast.
Yes, and also promotes indie shows. Yeah.
Right, but it's started out as kind of like they rewatch stuff, right? They do
Yeah.
watch alongs and that kind of stuff. Then a second Jim Cornette podcast, the Jim Cornette Experience, the Ringer Wrestling Show, which is this is the highest I've ever seen the Ringer Wrestling Show on this list. Do they have a big guest on?
I have no idea.
You're not locked into the Ringer Wrestling Show.
No.
You don't want to know what David Shoemaker and is that the one with Kaz maybe?
I think so. So the latest episode as we record this, long-term title reign casualties. Plus, does WWE know who John Cena's last opponent will be?
Damn.
And yes, it is David Shoemaker and Kazim.
Riveting stuff. I've never seen it that high though before. So
No, me
congrats to them.
neither. I'm not looking at the chart that regularly, but I don't remember it being that high.
I remember it being like barely being on the top 100. Like I've beaten it before, which shouldn't be happening. Then we'll give credit. We got the Not Sam Wrestling podcast, which is Sam Roberts, and then Solo Monster, which is Solo Monster is Brian Solomon, right?
No, Solo Monster is Jason Solomon.
Oh, I did not. Is there a difference? I have no idea.
Jason Solomon is the one that works with House of Glory.
Okay. Are these are, is that, would you consider that a nostalgia podcast? I have no idea.
I honestly have never really listened. I think Jason mainly covers current wrestling.
Okay, that's fine. So we're moving on. Then we got Flow Wrestling, which I assume is talking about amateur wrestling.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
it's in there because it's in there.
Yeah, okay. Then we got followed up. Oh, we've got some real heavy hitters here. We've got 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff, which the title of the podcast is talking about 83 weeks of time that took place 30 years ago. Then we've got Click This, the Kevin Nash podcast. Got to hear what Big Daddy Cool is saying. Chael
You know what
Sonnen.
though? He's had given some interesting nuggets out at times.
I'm
and
not-
He's not
I-
afraid to be. He's not afraid to be anti WWE.
Yeah,
I mean, we're
I'm
talking
not-
about a guy who said he was threatening to sue WWE on his podcast lately. So
I'm not offering that much criticism towards that. I'm talking about like where the focus is on these charts, which is like old wrestler.
yeah, Chael Sonnen's podcast, which should not be here.
Yeah, which he might talk about wrestling from time to time, but is obviously he's an MMA fighter. Then we got Talkus Jericho,
Which barely has wrestling guests on anymore.
Yeah, and I don't know. I guess that's still he's technically an active wrestler still, so
Kind of.
barriers. And then we got K100 with Conan and Disco.
Somehow.
Which in some ways isn't that kind of the most indicative of anything?
Because it's listening to these guys who could have interesting conversations about a bunch of wrestling topics, just talk about random bullshit and insult Dave Meltzer.
Well, I also think Conan was obviously a huge star in Mexico. Like Conan and like it's one thing like Kevin Nash was legit like kind of a big star. Eric Bischoff was a major name in pro wrestling. Jim Cornette is in many wrestling halls.
Conan was a mainstream celebrity in Mexico and to some degree still is. Yes.
Right. But like Conan and Disco to the American listener, these are two like one's a WCW job guy, the other guy was at best a mid Carter in WCW.
Yes.
Like these guys are not like wrestling legends that maybe have a built-in huge audience that's going to listen to them. Their claim to fame is that they were wrestlers on American television in the 90s.
Yeah.
And they have a successful podcast, which my understanding is I've never listened to it, so people can tell me I'm wrong, seems like when it gets headlines, it's mostly them shitting on current wrestling, particularly AEW.
Or Conan just airing his friend's business without permission.
Oh, Conan.
Yeah, how far are we going this? That was 15.
That's done. We're done with
Okay.
that. Unless you want to talk about what's your story with Stephanie McMahon or My World with Jeff Jarrett.
I think it's interesting that the Stephanie one. I mean, I get that these charts are influenced by new versus old, and not
Yeah.
just just not listenership. But I do find it odd that these WWE podcasts are all kind of floating around the 20 spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess my overall point is that a vast majority of the podcasts, which of course feed into the aggregators that we already talked about, is like old wrestler says this. And I think we as a wrestling society would just be better off if we got rid of all of those headlines and we never had to cover that ever again.
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen because of the reasons we mentioned above, or SEO and just trying to just scrape and claw and get any amount of attention as you can. But it's it's not a healthy discussion for the wrestling, that wrestling is so geared towards the past. And that spans many different ways, but a lot of it comes back to in the 90s there were a lot of wrestling fans, and a lot of those fans stopped watching wrestling. And so if they're to be reached in a podcast form, the two things they want to hear is people talking about things that they remember watching from when they were fans, and then validation for dismissing wrestling. And they get that on most of these podcasts.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I think we should be clear, like, once you get past, like, the top 20, maybe 25, I honestly don't know how reliable this is, because, like, there are a lot of
It's
podcasts
not. It's just one
here.
metric. Yeah.
There are a lot of podcasts on here where, like, based on where they are on Patreon, if they have ads, etc., do not seem particularly monetized. And I'm not going to name names with that, but you can spot some of them. I think you get an idea where I'm going with this. So like I don't understand why they would be so high. Or given the way the algorithm works with recency and stuff, how is Dark Side of the Ring Unheard, which hasn't had a new episode in the better part of a year, number 53? Like it doesn't seem like there's that much accurate. And also, I think you'll notice as we're scrolling down here, some shows are repeating themselves.
Yeah, they're just like other
And I'm
versions of
not
the
sure
show.
what the deal is with that. Like, is that when they took over an old feed or something? I don't know.
Yeah, and like I mean, I can yeah, your Patreon show, so maybe you have more information on this. Like I have literally no idea how many people listen to my podcast. Like I
Um,
don't even have a range that I could tell you how many people listen to my podcast because of how
well, don't you use
diverse
Red Circle for the hosting though?
we do. But even then, like,
You just go on the analytics page.
uh, I have no idea, Bix. Don't tell me how to do my job.
Okay.
Uh, better. I don't really want to know, to be honest. I think if I had to read a sponsor on this podcast, I would die.
I think
Um,
it's important to know though, like what percentage of your audience like is buying in like to Patreon and stuff. I think
yeah.
that is
Well,
valuable.
that's if you want to make money off your podcast, which I don't. I'll be the
Well,
first person to
fair
say that.
enough.
Yeah, my whole approach to podcasting is probably different than most people's. This is a podcast largely to entertain myself and a handful of other people. Um, anyway, do you think that anything has changed since I'm not a Twitter user
And by
anymore?
the way, we should be clear. That is number 74 Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network combined feed that people can hear you
Yeah, and I
on.
think most people would agree that I'm doing most of the work uh, on that one, despite the fact that I just said I don't care about this podcast. Anyone listening to this podcast. Well, my podcast has appeared on this before, like my individual feed.
Gentlemen's Wrestling has appeared on the top
Yeah,
100.
why you sound so surprised, Pixapan? This is a very popular podcast that I don't know how many people listen to.
Oh wait, on the top 100 of the list period, because now I see the list actually is going beyond top 100.
Yeah, I think we peaked at like 55 at one point or something like that.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe have some respect for this pod, Biggs. Anyway, um, I don't go on Twitter anymore.
Puzzle
I
tough.
I haven't for a while. I still have a Twitter account. Like I have, I'll occasionally hop on if it's like I like usually if someone's like embedded a tweet and I'll click on the tweet or on the rare occasion I'm really looking for like a sports highlight because that's the one thing that Blue Sky still hasn't quite caught up to is like
Mhm.
if I'm looking for an immediate highlight, Twitter is still a really good spot to find that kind of stuff. But like, do you think like kind of like post Elon takeover on Twitter, like also just like this post Trump world, we're seeing, and also kind of somewhat tied into like the TKO takeover of WWE. People are more comfortable saying things on social media that they wouldn't have been previously.
I mean, until the last couple of years, I don't think. Let me rephrase. I think I would have been surprised to click on a Brian Zane tweet and see people replying to him asking him to defend the Talmud and made up Nazi like urban legends about the Talmud. So like now I'm not surprised to see that kind of thing, which is by the way, is not anything he made up, is a real thing that happened.
It was
Uh,
very, very specific, so I don't think anyone thought you made it up.
I
Thanks.
would hope not. Um, like it's absolutely changed. I mean, we saw all these rushes of people celebrate. I mean, like, not. I'm not saying specific to wrestling. We saw these rushes of people celebrating. Oh, we can say the N word on Twitter again now and stuff like that. Like,
Hmm.
of course, it's changed.
And just overall, like I think with the TKO acquisition and like the way that Dana and many UFC fighters have chosen to conduct themselves publicly, changes, I think, the way that WWE views the way people should conduct themselves. Um, yeah, I think in general, there was an enormous amount of fear several years ago of like someone could get canceled for saying just one wrong thing, which I don't think has really ever happened. Um,
I mean, you
but
know what? The only example really I think you can say is that PR. Oh God, what was her name? The public relations woman who went on a flight on was going to what was it, South Africa? And she tweeted something like, oh, Justine Sacco was her name, right?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You've never heard the story?
Who is she a PR person for?
I think just some PR agency.
Okay.
And apparently she meant this in a satirical, expressing frustration with how discrimination in healthcare and stuff is way, but to the people who stumbled onto it, they didn't know that. I may be misremembering that part. That she tweeted something like, getting on the plane to go to South Africa now, hope I don't get AIDS, LOL, I won't because I'm white. Something like that. And then her phone was off for however many hours, and she lost her job.
Well, that lesson is never tweet. I guess my point is I think in a post-Trump world, I think a lot of people have been emboldened to just say whatever the fuck they want.
Yes.
Because the lesson of Trumpism is that there aren't really any consequences for saying crazy things, offensive things, dangerous things. And that trickles down into everything, and does that trickle into wrestling? I think it absolutely does.
Of course it does. No, it absolutely does.
I mean, the company brought back Hulk Hogan, and they trotted him out. They got him, they're sponsoring or supporting his beer brands.
Well, they invested a small amount in the beer brand, and the beer brand then is sponsoring Raw.
Yeah. Okay, that's right. Yeah, but they're in. I have a business relationship with Hulk Hogan's endorsed beer brand,
which is also just bizarre because I don't watch Raw or SmackDown much anymore. I've been watching some the last few weeks of Raw, and it's jarring when you see the Hogan beer commercials because it is so much more low rent than all the other ads on the show.
That's interesting. I don't have the same observation. I've never seen an ad for Hulk Hogan's Real American beer, but so they brought Hogan back, who I don't know, doesn't have. I think the lesson for Hogan is that Hogan doesn't have a huge amount of value to WWE these days, because his reputation has been soiled.
Yes.
But it's a lesson to anyone in the locker room. It's just yeah, you could say something and do you think you remember the Lars Sullivan incidents?
Which stage of it?
But the posts on bodybuilding.com.
So the bodybuilding.com post being found out. Okay.
Yes.
So for those who don't know, this was before he was a wrestler or training to be a wrestler. He was, what would you call him, a racist and homophobic troll on bodybuilding.com?
Yes. He posted things that unfortunately were very common during the time period of when he was posting them on message boards. But yeah, he gets basically once he starts appearing on WWE TV, and I believe right before he's about to receive a big push.
It was when he got called up to the main roster.
Yeah.
Because none of this had come to the surface when he was in
NXT. They come up, and WWE they find him $100,000 or something.
God, I don't sympathize with the guy for what he posted, but
it was totally disproportional to
something that he did years before he was ever worked for you.
Yeah, and honestly, I would if this was a normal business, not the wrestling business, I'm pretty sure your employee, can your employer even fine you for something that you did years ago?
Yeah.
But anyway, it doesn't matter because his career never really worked out. But I don't think that would ever happen now. They would never be so proactive in saying, "Whoa, this guy said the wrong things. We got to make an example out of him."
Years earlier, before he was in the business,
yeah,
I'm looking it up now to refresh my memory on when the posts are actually from. Because this all coming out was May 2019.
Yeah, I think the posts were for 5 years before that or something.
2007 to 2013 under the usernames Disenfranchised and El Perfecto.
But that's something that I think that the rhetoric has changed, and I think that the company doesn't care that much about it. And
no, they would write off little things. I don't think Jessica Havoc would lose out on a job that she thought she was getting for old tweets today.
Mm-hmm.
That's another example. I'm trying to think who else is there that we know.
Well,
That
they're and historically their punishments have always been very arbitrary. Like
yeah, like
like Randy Orton said the N-word on a live stream. Like I
and
think
nothing happened.
yeah, like
Yeah.
nothing happened because he's Randy
Okay.
Orton.
Okay. Here's one for you. Do you think they would care? And let's say it's at a recent time where it's hard to judge if they were if Jay Briscoe was genuinely sorry. If the Jay Briscoe thing was, I guess, more recent, or let's just say no. And if it was today's WWE with their mindset back when WWE was looking to sign the Briscoes and then decided against it, would they just have signed them anyway? And I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, I would say yes. And part of that is also like the Briscoes can go to a wrestling company that could hurt WWE in a way that they couldn't at the time period, right?
That's probably part of it too. And
Except they couldn't because they couldn't appear in AEW. Um,
yeah, and as like a side note, I think their specific like situation and the job security they had in Ring of Honor, I think kind of contributes to how everything played out long term. Like
yeah,
I think they were like resigned to the fact that like okay, we have our successful family businesses, we're getting very well paid to do what we love on a reasonable schedule in Ring of Honor. We're content with our lives, but we realized we screwed up. I mean, more so Jay, but Mark had said some things at times too that weren't great. So it's just like you know, let's make it right quietly. We're not begging for a job anywhere, and it led to the weird situation where it wasn't widely known that these guys had made very legitimate turnarounds, but eventually, especially after Jay passed, it really reassured most people that it was genuine because they weren't going out of their way like, oh, we have this job we could get.
yeah. I mean, to
We
be honest,
apologize
my
publicly.
personal opinion was, like for regarding like Jay Briscoe's comments, um, like horrible things to say, completely uncalled for. I really genuinely hope that he didn't actually believe that. I have a
I
hard
don't
time.
know if he believed literally he would shoot someone
Yes,
who
yes,
thought his kid's gay marriage was okay.
that's what I mean. Like,
Yeah,
I
but
guess but like I personally, this is just me. I never thought that should disqualify him from
I think you know what
bigger
though.
bigger things.
I think it was the specifics and the violence and the "I will shoot you."
Yeah,
I
yeah, no,
think
and it's
something homophobic that was less visceral and violent and potentially like incitement sounding. I think if it was, I think if it fit that bill, I think he probably would have been able to get past it sooner.
yeah, and yeah, like you said, like they. I mean, the story was it's like they're happy working Ring of Honor, which was at the time really centered around where they lived. Like they were doing a lot of tapings in Baltimore. They did stuff in Philadelphia. They'd go up to New York, but it was, a Northeast company. They had a successful family business.
I mean, they had
Um,
multiple successful family businesses. There's the chicken farm. There's the landscaping business. I don't know if there's more.
they've got 4,000 kids, or at least Mark does. Um, and like you can look at like I think there's several years where they only work for Ring of Honor.
Yeah, because it got to the point where Ring of Honor pretty much went just straight up exclusive domestically for those under contract.
But
So,
they
like,
could
if
I
you
mean they
saw them
didn't
outside of ROH, you mainly saw them internationally.
but they didn't even do a lot of international work. Like they could have taken a lot more dates outside of Ring of Honor. Uh,
Right, but they were making good money and they had time with their family. And
yes, like they could have done more tours of Japan if they wanted to. They could have worked more indie dates, and they
Progress,
just
Rev Pro, whatever.
yeah, there was this was a time where there was actually a lot of opportunity for like a top indie star, which they absolutely were.
Yes.
Um, and uh, so yeah, maybe they never take that. Maybe they were resigned to that. But to answer your original question, I would absolutely think it's not disqualifying. Like the question would be like, I think the difference would be, would WWE address the comments in any way, shape, or form when they signed him?
I don't know. I
I
mean,
don't
but
think they would.
But also, I think the way it played out guaranteed them becoming better people and learning from it more than they would have otherwise, too.
Well, that's that's a good philosophical like life question, which is that yes, instead of ignoring it by being forced to address their mistakes, they grew as people, and uh,
Yeah, like I say this
that's
all,
their that's the restorative justice argument.
yeah, like I say this when it comes up. It's like, dude, like these aren't the exact words they use that Mark used, but you combine what Mark said, like in the eulogy, with what they said on that podcast about a year earlier. Like, we're talking two guys who basically abandoned organized religion over feeling that they were duped into supporting hate. That's a lot.
And with wrestlers, not that this is an excuse or anything, but like when wrestlers say things like, are they in character? Are they not in character? Are they semi in
Well,
character?
that was, I think, one of Jay's biggest downfalls was that he claimed it was in character, but he was a babyface at the time.
Right. Which is, unless you were
And
in
and like, look, he admitted later. He admitted, a decade
yeah,
later, like, you know what? Yes, I did believe that at the
yeah.
time, and I probably, I forget if he
I
outright said
mean,
I
he
shouldn't
would
have
it would
lied about
I
it,
mean,
but
yeah. I mean, he would have been a babyface in Bill Watts territory or something like that. Um, but yeah, I think that. I mean, like, would Zachary Wentz be fired by WWE today?
ooh, I mean, the thing with Wentz
With
though,
WWE, it might be in for a push these days.
but also you
But
had like the two simultaneous controversies, even if the whatchamacallit, even if the apparently the Hitler mustache photo was what got him fired. But you know what? Do I think specifically with the context we know now that basically that Dave Christ goaded him into taking the photo to hold on to as blackmail for years. I I think he probably wouldn't have been fired. No.
yeah, I mean, again, if he was someone that WWE really valued, um, they probably don't fire him anyway. But it's one of the things that made the Lars Sullivan thing kind of interesting because that was clearly somebody they had huge plans for.
Yes.
And they,
But they had to do something once it got attention because he had said so many things about people he'd be working with.
yeah,
That I
um,
think was the biggest problem. That it was talking about people who he'd actually be on the road with, and now was starting to get more eyeballs at bigger places.
all right. Is there anything you want to add? Anything we haven't gotten to? I know this has been kind of a wide-ranging, like looser discussion than normal, but I've enjoyed the discussion. Do you have anything you want to plug? Anything else you want to get to before we sign off?
Hmm. I mean, there was one thing earlier because we kind of moved on, so I didn't want to just dive back into it as you moved on from it. But like in the first half, in the discussion of like what are wrestlers thinking and how do they
Hmm.
view stuff, I did kind of want to get your opinion on something. So like it going out of our conversation about people who are trying to be professional extras and
Yeah.
potentially parlay wrestling into being an influencer and stuff. So, how much do you know about the sponsor economy as it relates to indie wrestling these days?
So you're talking about individual fans or sponsors that will basically pay the booking fee to,
And often the travel expenses. Yes.
yes, to pay the fee, right? So if I am a huge fan of an indie wrestler, I will like, I don't know, Dom Garini, to just say a name. I'd be like, man, I really want to see Dom Garini. I can presumably go to to Drew Cordero and say, hey, can you bring in Dom for this match? I'll pay for his expenses and things like that. So that's what you're talking about, right?
Yes. Now they do exist for male wrestlers. I don't want it to sound like they don't.
Hmm.
But it is much more pervasive with the women,
Hmm.
and you get into this whole situation now where, and I think this goes to what you said too about not necessarily really having as good an understanding of wrestling, even if you broke in through the indies, is like you have a lot of wrestlers now where if just the right sponsors take a liking to them for whatever reason, whether it's skills, look, whatever, they have just a completely different experience from someone who had to scratch and claw. So I'm curious how, like, again, it's probably much more on the women's side, even though it exists on the men's side. But I'm curious how much you think potentially that impacts the kind of thing we were talking about.
If they're aware of the sponsorships, I think it's
if you're either someone who is I guess
Yeah.
mainly if you're
Let's
someone
say you're
who
like a
is getting
generic.
sponsored like
Yeah.
that.
So like if you're like a generic NXT wrestler and you get cut by WWE and you're looking to make some indie dates and you have a number and maybe you're not getting that many dates, there are sponsors out there. I mean, I don't know that much about like the actual like nature of that. Like,
I mean,
um,
it's really more with indie wrestlers coming up through the indie scene.
yeah, it's hard for me to wrap my head around, to be honest, because that's just something I would never even think about
I just feel
doing.
it hit me as we were talking that like I just feel like it changes the experience enough that it can't not have an impact, you know?
I mean, it definitely does if you're looking at a way to, you still have to want to get bookings.
In that case, yes.
Like you still have to want to, um, let's say I'll name a price and someone hits it. You're like, all right, I guess I'm still going to, you know, drive somewhere or get on a plane somewhere and go and work in indies. And I think a lot of people just don't want to do that. Even like they don't really want to like wrestle. Like, let me look. I want to look this up. Like, have you been following Shotzi Blackheart's post WWE career?
Not closely, but she's working fairly regularly, right?
I'm trying to think. Like, is she? So, I see her a lot. I guess she's working. So she is working a lot of matches. I happen to have seen her. Yeah, so she's working quite regularly, actually. I was, and so this maybe she's not a great example of this, but I was just gonna say like I have seen her on a few indie shows recently where she's like the host of the show, and she is like she's around, she's doing stuff, but she's not wrestling. Um,
So she's been averaging like 6+ matches a month.
yeah, no, she actually is working quite prolifically now that I
Yeah.
look at it. So she's maybe not a great example, but it just so happened that I had watched two indie shows recently where she was on the show but not wrestling, and so I was thinking like, oh, maybe she's getting these dates, to do. I'm sure she's doing meet and greets. I'm sure she's doing promotion on her social media to all of her presumably many social media followers, so that the promoters are getting a value out of her, but she's not actually wrestling, which is apparently not the case. But there are plenty of indie wrestlers that are doing that, or ex WWE wrestlers that are doing that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Um I mean it seems like the whole meet and greet thing just continues to be very lucrative for recent WWE people in general. Because like look like I think the thing we lose sight of is how many like other conventions there are, like comic book, sci-fi, whatever conventions that will have spaces for wrestlers that
Yep.
vendors will pay for. And I think we lose sight of that when we think about the prospects of like Cross and Scarlet. Like you look at their schedule and they've got a bunch of different non-wrestling conventions
Mhm.
scheduled. And
Yeah, that's
uh,
yeah. No, you're 100% right in something, especially, and that comes from fame, right? You need to be, people want to meet a famous person that they saw on TV, that they saw in WWE, right? That's what the goal is. And I think again, that's not wrestling, directly wrestling related, but wrestling is a means to reaching that.
yes.
Wrestling can be a means to do. I know Karrion Kross is doing acting. I heard that his short is getting some Oscar consideration, according to Wrestling News Co. Um,
Wait, really? Or is that a
the
joke?
Wrestling News Co. ran a headline that was like Karrion Kross's like short film getting Oscar consideration, but I actually didn't click on the story, and I feel like it's just Karrion Kross told people that he was getting Oscar consideration, and someone ran it as a story, but uh, people can check that if they want. But
Wait, former WWE star celebrates Academy Award nomination at Slam Wrestling. What the?
the Academy Awards are not out yet, and the nominations won't be out till January, so I would be very
Oh,
surprised.
he's in a movie that's been nominated for an Oscar. He's in a short film that's been nominated for, I guess, best live action short film.
But the nominations aren't even out yet. They won't be out till January.
Yeah, wait a second. Or does stuff like short film get nominated earlier?
I don't think so. I
No,
think
it's
those.
Oscar qualified. Yeah, they're misunderstanding what his tweet said.
Okay, yeah, there we go.
It's Oscars
Perfect.
qualified, officially in consideration.
All right, how many movies get Oscar qualified each year?
A lot.
Yeah, is my guess. So anyway, we're going to be really eating crow when Karrion Kross is hoisting up that Oscar trophy this spring for his performance.
But no, I don't think he's on like a well, no, he's not even a producer. I was going to say like
Mhm.
a Walton Goggins trajectory,
Yeah.
where Walton Goggins like had an Oscar before he was a successful TV actor. Um, but he was a
I-
he was like a producer and I think co-writer of that movie, so that's not even the
yeah.
same thing. But anyway,
Anyway,
I know you
um,
have a heart out.
yeah, no, but I guess yeah, the convention scene is interesting, like in terms of like the pathways that being on WWE television in particular can open up to people beyond wrestling, and do people see wrestling as a means to an end as opposed to the thing they want to do with their life?
I
Um,
think more people see it that way than have in a while, I think is probably the way to put it.
yeah, and I think as wrestling fans, as hardcore wrestling fans, we think we project what we think onto all these people, which is that all these people want to grow up and they all want to be Mitsuharu Misawa, but
Yeah.
most of these people don't, and the ones that do actually really stand out. Like the Bryan Danielsons of the world. And like very few wrestlers, like Bryan Danielson would say, yeah, I main evented WrestleMania. I didn't really feel anything. And then I worked, this one other match, and that's what I was looking for in pro wrestling. Like no one, like very few people would have that reaction. But Bryan Danielson's a weirdo, who just takes the art of pro wrestling super seriously. And that's one of the reasons he's so great. But he's an
Well,
anomaly.
yes, although in that specific case, it was also his neck was a mess. His father died like a week
Yeah,
later,
no, I know. But it's clear
stuff
his
like that. Yeah.
passion for wrestling was not.
And it's high. And so to have a similar like storyline moment, but that was part of like a more like it wasn't like a last minute change like it
Yeah.
was in WWE, and with his whole family there and getting to bring his kids and his wife in the ring. Like, yeah, of course that's going to mean more to him, especially when on top of everything else, like, gun to my head right now, my mind might change if I rewatch some stuff. I think the Swerve match is genuinely the best match of his career.
Yeah, I rewatch very little AEW matches just because there's so much other stuff I need to watch, and I always feel like I'm getting bogged down. I mean,
I was rewatching
yeah,
parts of it the other day, and it just the part where the emotion just really ratchet up, where he starts like no selling the kicks out of love for his family and everything. It just
yes, you talked about this. This is I know we're going over time here, but this is hilarious. You talked about this on Blue Sky where you got like a response from somebody,
like
uh,
multiple weird blue anon like libs like with their "this is why wrestling is MAGA" like replies. It's like okay,
like simulated violence is bad no matter what. Like okay, like really high quality, like
but
yeah.
it makes people who celebrate this kind of violence are going to celebrate the real violence perpetrated by ICE. What? No.
Have you ever watched a movie ever in your life?
I don't understand
Yeah.
why this is only happening on Blue Sky and like has never happened anywhere else. And it's always videos. If you post something that's not if you don't post videos, you're never gonna have this happen to you.
Yeah.
But if for some reason if you post a wrestling video on Blue Sky and it gets an ounce of traction, it'll show up in the Discover tab and these people see it and get irrationally angry.
Between the Sheets.
Yes. BetweenTheSheetsPod.com, Between the Sheets, where all podcasts are available. Patreon.com/BetweenTheSheets for the bonus content.
What are you guys doing this week? Which are your recent episodes going over any particular
The
periods of time?
one. So, okay, the episode we just had go up is 2002, which is the week after Katie Vick with the fallout, with the Triple H promo, with the mannequin, among various other
What a
things.
time to revisit pro wrestling.
Yeah, yeah, we haven't done the week of the actual skit. I don't know if we do that next year or whatever. And then next week's going to be 1985. And on the Patreon, we did our Chuck and Billy Hot Lesbian Action shows, looking back at that. We did a show looking back at the interviews that the Road Warriors gave when they left WWE in '92. Got some stuff coming up about Tully Blanchard getting basically kicked out of the business by WWF and WCW in '89, '90, and everything that happened there. That's coming up, so people can check that out on patreon.com/between the sheets.
All right, excellent. Thanks a lot. I want to thank David Bixpan for joining the show, and I'll talk to you again after a while.
Hi, I'm Case Lowe, co-host of the Open the Voice Gate podcast. The one question I'm constantly asked when it comes to Dragon Gate is, how do I get into the promotion? Well, stop asking and start listening to the Open the Voice Gate podcast, released every Wednesday on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. For exclusive news and show reviews, look no further than the leader in Dragon Gate coverage, Open the Voice Gate.
Hey everybody, my name is Jesse Collins, and I am the host of the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, a show right here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. On the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, we take a deep look at individual issues and stories that are going on in the wrestling world. Each episode is about a different topic, and we take a thorough and educated look at things ranging from current booking trends to breakdowns on individual performers and angles to investigations into different fan cultures across the industry. In addition, we keep a close eye on the wrestling media, and as a professional journalist, I bring a unique perspective to how current issues in wrestling are being covered and discussed through the wrestling media. We have a revolving series of guests from across wrestling punditry joining us on each episode, and we hope that you make the choice to give us a listen on wherever you get your podcast from.